everyone. I'm MaryJo Archambault. I am a CTRS, and I am also the alternate camp director for the Yvonne Lendl camp through the Hospital for Special Care, and I also coordinate the volunteers. I am an associate professor at Southern Connecticut State University, and I coordinate both the graduate and undergraduate programs in recreation therapy. And presenting with me is my colleague and friend, Janet
Hey there,
Connolly.
folks. It's Janet Connolly coming to you with MaryJo here in Connecticut, and we're thrilled to join you today. I am employed by Hospital for Special Care in a number of capacities, but first and foremost, I'm a proud CTRS and have been for more years than you can count. But anyway, my primary role here is with the adaptive sports and community programs of the hospital. So the community side of the hospital, where I am the manager of all of those programs, one of which is the Hospital for Special Care Yvonne Lendl Adaptive Sports Camp, which is what we're going to be talking about today. I also happen to be adjunct faculty at the Southern Connecticut State University that MaryJo spoke of, and speak highly to my students about the utilization of the API process across all areas of our practice, which is also why we're thrilled today to be with you to bring this to a community side. How exciting is that, folks? So without further ado, MaryJo, let's get rolling.
Excellent. Thank you, Janet. All righty. And okay, so thank you, Janet. And today we are very happy to be presenting on demystifying the application of the TR process in an adaptive sports camp. And we are thrilled to be at the 25th annual conference for the New York State Therapeutic Recreation Association. So thank you, everyone, and thank you for joining us. So we do have a few session objectives. Our first one is for all of you to really understand the application of the TR process to an adaptive sports camp.
And additionally, we want to provide a minimum of 5 benefits of the overall program design.
And also for you to identify the survey design, the means of collection, and the dissemination of results.
And additionally, just identifying other needs that have been kind of come clear to us as it relates to the survey data that we have acquired over the years. So I think we'd be remiss if we didn't kind of speak to an adaptive sports camp and its affiliation with a hospital. It's actually more common than you think. But the Hospital for Special Care, I want to kind of give you a little bit of a history here. We are a 228-bed, freestanding, long-term acute care hospital. We are the 4th largest in the whole country, and one of only 2 in the nation that serves children all the way up through adults. The Hospital for Special Care is proud to have 8 centers of specialty, which include serving individuals, again, of all ages with spinal cord injury, traumatic brain injury, or acquired brain injury, medically complex pediatrics, neuromuscular conditions of a variety of nature, pulmonary care, which is, again, that's how the hospital initially started. Comprehensive heart failure, medical rehab, both inpatient and outpatient. And we also are one of the only comprehensive inpatient and outpatient treatment programs for youth and children on the autism spectrum. The camp happens to fall not within the auspices of the patient realm, but camp falls under the community side of the hospital. The community side oversees the adaptive sports programs that I spoke of that offer training and competition year-round to youth living with physical disability or visual impairment following the Paralympic model, in sports of track and field, swimming, adaptive sports camp, wheelchair basketball, and we tend to delve into some other areas when it is getting ready for Paralympic years. Also under the adaptive sports program certainly is the camp, which is going to be our focus today. The few other areas that fall under the community side of the hospital, and it's real exciting because it's all TR related, is a therapeutic riding program, a outpatient membership driven aquatic rehab and therapy gym program. So whether it's coming for use of warm water therapy pools or our lap swim pool, we've got it all. So without further ado, we're going to move right into the mission with MaryJo.
Thanks, Janet. So if you are going to be creating an adapted sports program, or any program for that matter, you want to be sure it aligns with your organization's mission statement. As you see on this slide, I have the mission statement for the Hospital for Special Care. I want to draw your attention to the bolded areas on the slide. What do you see? Functional improvements, quality of life, and responsive to the needs of individuals in our community. I think our data at the end will speak to the increase in quality of life, without a doubt. And if you spoke to our participants or their families, you would definitely hear about the functional gains that our athletes have gained throughout the summer, throughout participating in adaptive sports. But it's important to understand what are the needs of the community. So our camp is for individuals with physical disabilities within the ages of 7 and 19. The literature will speak to you about that children and youth with disabilities often have fewer opportunities than their naturally developing counterparts to engage in physical activity and are often less physically fit. In fact, according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, children and adults with mobility limitations are at greater risk for obesity. And approximately 20% of children ages 10 to 17 who have special health care needs are considered obese. It is equally important to understand the social and emotional needs of our participants. For many, this is the only time they are with a peer who also has a disability, who also uses a wheelchair or assistive devices. They are able to participate in activities that they might not have thought possible, and their self-efficacy is increased through watching their coaches who also have disabilities, through watching their peers be successful, and through the support and encouragement they receive from volunteers, staff, coaches alike. So it is important to create programs based on need, but also based on the research. In the following slides, we will talk about some of the research that speaks to the efficacy of an adaptive sports camp. So the first research that I want to talk about, it's at the bottom of your screen. We have two studies. The first one was done in 2011, and it included individuals ages 14 to 50 with a physical disability who had participated in adapted sports program for at least 1 year. The average time that they participated was 8 years, 7 months. For those of you that are involved in adapted sports, this will be no surprise to you, because I honestly think that once people are exposed to the world of adapted sports, they're hooked. Like, it becomes a family. It's not just the activity, it's that social network. So I was not surprised by that. The results from this study felt that in general, these individuals felt stigmatized and stereotyped because of their disability. However, participation in adaptive sports and recreations provided them with opportunities to build social networks, to experience freedom and success, and feel a sense of normalcy, and be able to positively compare themselves with others without disabilities. The second study was 2013, and Ryan and colleagues actually cited the health benefits of participating in organized adaptive sports. These included both significant mental health benefits as well as physical benefits, some of which I listed on this slide. Okay, so our next bit of evidence. If you look at the study done in 2017, research was done on the effect of adaptive sports on the quality of life and the biopsychosocial profile of children and adolescents with cerebral palsy. After 1 year of participating in adaptive sports, participants had greater mobility, decreased levels of pain, and higher quality of life. There was also significant improvement in those participants who were also diagnosed with ADHD. In the second study, 2005, Goodwin and Staples examined the impact of summer camp experiences for individuals with disabilities ages 14 to 19. Their research found that camp provided a reprieve from their communities where they often felt isolated. To me, that is such a powerful finding. The research also found that participants experienced increased self-reliance, independence, and a better understanding of what they could physically accomplish. One of the things that I think is telling is that towards the end of our presentation, we are going to be talking about the results from our surveys. And you're going to find that our participants are saying many of the things that the research has already told us is possible through the use of adaptive sports. So according to the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, regular physical activity is listed as one of the most important things you can do for your health. And I am sure that we are all aware of that. However, we may not be aware that oftentimes for individuals with disabilities, it's more challenging for them to participate in regular physical activity. Some of the reasons why might be physical limitations that can reduce a person's ability to exercise, lack of energy, lack of accessible environments, lack of resources, such as equipment, money, transportation, lack of self-efficacy, social isolation from peers, or lack of social support. Becker and Dussing, 2010, completed a single case study on a child with Down syndrome. The child was enrolled in a 14-week performing arts session with peers and was found to have increased self-confidence and self-esteem. And the experience also contributed to a sense of pride. In 2009, a literature review was conducted looking at the association between quality of life and leisure participation in children with neurodevelopmental disabilities. There were 7 themes related to quality of life that emerged from the data, and supported the contribution of leisure participation for quality of life. A key component was the children's ability to participate in preferred activities. So this brings us to the Ivan Lendl Adaptive Sports Camp. Janet?
All right. Well, we wanted to feature this slide because it's indicative. This is what camp is on day one. Who are our folks? You can't help but look at this slide and see the smiles that radiate from each and every child, each and every adult that's there. And I'm going to speak to this now, but we'll also touch on it later on, that we purposely take this photo on day one because we can provide it to all of our potential funders. We can provide it to those who have funded the camp for this year, to the hospital's board of directors, all of the stakeholders, so that they can see that we're not just making up these facts and figures and asking for a handout. We're not. We're asking for support to be able to implement these programs that really do have such benefit. And I know MaryJo had listed the link to a beautiful story, and I encourage you all to, type that into your browser and, watch it. It's just a minute long, but it speaks volumes to the happiness, the joy that we get to experience with our kiddos.
Yes, it definitely gives you a little glimpse into the life of camp.
Yep.
Okay, so adaptive sports are growing in popularity across the country, with a variety of sports being adapted and more accessible for individuals to participate in. Our camp provides an opportunity to introduce a variety of these sports and activities, including track and field events, bocce, soccer, tennis, swimming, golf, and one year we even were able to offer sled hockey outside in our parking lot. We had the fake ice. It was fabulous. So we also provide opportunities for various levels of involvement, including recreational, competitive, as well as opportunities for elite athletes to sharpen their skills. So Janet, why don't you tell us a little bit about the design of the program?
So typically, our camp is a day camp. And part of the justification for that is the added expense that would be incurred if we were to try to look at making this model an overnight camp. Camp is for only 1 week a year. We average 40 to 45 kids, as you can see. And as MaryJo mentioned on the introduction, typical ages are 7 to 19. Sometimes we get a 5-year-old or 6-year-old that is ready to be at camp, which is awesome. 100% of our campers have disabilities. And some of those include, probably the most common diagnoses are cerebral palsy, spinal cord injury, spina bifida, limb difference, a variety of neuromuscular conditions, including muscular dystrophy and some of your more rare types of neuromuscular conditions. And we get a draw from typically New England states. Certainly our largest is from Connecticut itself, but that because of the recognition and awareness being built about our program, there's a history and a rich one at that. So that we're getting folks as far away as Buffalo, New York. And we have folks who have originally been living here in Connecticut, who have moved to other states, who are participating in a Zoom format. Thanks to this last year, has introduced us all to different ways of participating. We share all of the adaptive sports equipment. It's owned by the programs here at Hospital for Special Care. And that allows the individuals to attend for free. that we don't want financial barriers to be what is the limitation to keep people away. So we do whatever we can to try to encourage participation and bring people on board. When we're looking for facilities to host our program, there's only been a few over the many years camp has taken place. And what we kind of put as our bucket list is, first and foremost, yes, there have to be a minimum of 5 tennis courts, because tennis is what the camp grew out of. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. Indoor gym space, because camp does run, rain or shine. Weather is not a barrier, unless there seems to be like a hurricane or tornado coming through, which has happened, in which case we try to get everybody home as safe and quickly as possible. So indoor spaces for multi-use program areas that can flip on a dime to have wheelchair basketball 1 minute, and then the next program coming in might be adaptive yoga or dance. So that there's a variety of things that take place. Certainly everything needs to be physically accessible. And so we're always appreciative of the community partners that can come on board and work with us to provide facilities. Our staff is a mixture of, you heard, MaryJo introduce herself initially as a per diem employee, and I'm the camp director for the week. We bring on board other hospital employees to help round out and meet the needs of what our campers are in need of. So nurses and CNAs, and we'll talk about the need and the justification for some of this a little bit later. But it's a mixture of hospital employees, contracted workers, and especially those that fall into that bucket group are our specialty coaches, who they themselves are either Paralympic level athletes or coaches, or at the very least have either been an athlete or coach at the national level. And then we round out with roughly 40 volunteers that are handpicked. It's not just one of these that you want to come, you can show up. MaryJo is going to talk a little bit about that later on. And of course, we love it when we get TR interns, because they get to come and learn the whole processes and get to live and work alongside us as we're putting the whole API process together. Now with this slide, there's a lot going on, but I want to draw your attention first and foremost to the young man in the suit. And in the center of the picture is the petite lady with the big smile, the red lipstick. She's adorable. This is Janice Slifka, and her son is Jonathan, who is in with the red tie. They are the reason that the camp has taken place for so many years. And just a little bit of a history, so you get to figure out, why are they there? So Jonathan had an older brother, and like many, his older brother played tennis and went to a tennis camp. And so Jonathan, as he was growing up, his family all were tennis players, and he was no different. And he said, well, Mom, I want to go to play tennis. Well, one year it just happened that Jonathan was the poster child for March of Dimes. And one of the key ambassadors that year, also from March of Dimes, was Yvonne Lendl. And back then, everybody knew who Yvonne Lendl was, because he was your up and coming rising star and player. He was not coaching yet at that time. And so the Slifkas got talking with Yvonne and shared that, yes, Jonathan's passion is tennis, and they wished that he could play wheelchair tennis. Well, Yvonne got them connected with the National Foundation of Wheelchair Tennis, and he got to go to a tennis camp, but it was out in California. Had a marvelous experience, but came back, excited, but also Mom shared with Yvonne that, it's too bad there's not a tennis camp here in Connecticut or New England or anywhere on the East Coast. So Yvonne said, well, why don't you make one? And so with Yvonne's support, they started, and for 2 years did some fundraising, and then began what is now known today, the Yvonne Lendl Adaptive Sports Camp. which has now been managed by the Hospital for Special Care for many years. And again, want to draw your attention to key player in the picture. The beautiful lady in the red dress is the CEO of Hospital for Special Care. So how very important is that you have in a photo the key stakeholders? The other gentleman in the suit, the tall one, tall drink of water, he's awesome. Hopefully he looks familiar to some of you for many reasons, not only because he is an on-air personality, and depending on where you are, Nystra folks may see him in your catchment area. And if not, he's very active in sports. And this is Will Reeve, who son of the late Christopher and Dana Reeve. And he came to camp because of that beautiful check. We applied and have been successful for a number of years to receive quality of life support funds from the Christopher and Dana Reeve Foundation. And Will was there that day to meet our campers, bring us the ceremonial check. And I'm in the picture there, and so is the grant writer, Michelle, that had helped us secure those funds and some of our campers. What's really special, in addition, is that once Will Reeve came to camp, it was such a passionate movement that although he was in a suit taking his lunch break from ESPN at the time, he asked, could he come back to volunteer? Because he was so moved by what was taking place. Will has since returned to camp at least on 2 other occasions, whether we were asking for funds or not, because he sees the value of the programs and wants to hear about the stories of what these kids are doing and where they're going down the road. Because yeah, as MaryJo started saying, this is special. This is not just something that takes place and the impact is, okay, it's there and then it's gone. You know, you're going to be hearing more throughout this presentation about the impact is far-reaching and not just historical data, not just research, but lives are changed. So this is a lightened year actually but an organizational chart. So you actually get a takeaway of, well, what it takes to staff an adaptive sports camp. So first and foremost, you see at the top, myself as the camp director and proud CTRS, mind you. Underneath us is MaryJo, the alternate director. By state guidelines, you're required to have one. God forbid anything were to happen to me, but there has to be a minimum of 1 person who can step in at a moment's notice in case there was any concerns or issues that there was not a director available. We bring to camp an RN. That is not a requirement by the state, but that we feel it's critically important because of the medical complexity of some of our folks. And we want families to feel comfortable and rest assured that we have we're not just meeting the minimum standards, but no, we have quality people we're bringing to provide services. When you see the little box far to your right where it says HSC staff, predominantly those are CTRS staff. And the why do we have additional CTRSs that we get on loan from the hospital? We're going to speak on that in a little while. But then you look down further and we see head coach of tennis. Again, why? Because tennis is what built this camp from the ground up. And you'll hear us comment on tennis later as it relates to the who loves tennis when to come to camp. So 2 tennis coaches, a track and field coach, a basketball coach, hand cycling, male and female head counselors, and then a minimum of 5 or 6 counselors. This year we happen to have an intern or 2, and so they can assist in helping with program delivery. I would be remiss if I did not call out as well, under the HSC staff that are on loan, we, over the years, have realized the importance of having CNA staff, and we're going to speak to their roles later on. A CNA is Certified Nursing Assistant. Okay, so let's talk for a minute about why CTRSs? What's the role of the CTRS? Well, as we know, are we not the best at providing leadership, program design, the ability to have in our back pocket, not just program design of what was intended, but always a plan B, a plan C, in case the heavens opened up and we need to make change. Okay, we, as you heard MaryJo and I mention, that the support staff that we get on loan from the hospital often come over because they have additional either specialty certifications or even specialty coaching licenses that they've gone and taken on additional training, sometimes pretty significant and lengthy, such as individuals that come on board because they participated and became certified as a bocce coach or adaptive yoga, or many, many things. And again, why the CTRS? Because that's what we do. We know how to provide the assessments. We know how to plan accordingly to meet the greatest needs. We know how to carry it all out and get that program implementation off the ground, done. So then we can step back and provide an evaluation, whether we're not talking about treatment based, but we're talking about evaluating these individuals and really all of our aspects of program design. Okay. And I think that's where we're very fortunate to have available the plethora of CTRS support from Hospital for Special Care. And honestly, in the summer when it's beautiful, and who wouldn't want to come to a camp and you saw all of our beautiful tie-dye, cheery, happy kids, who wouldn't want to come and help support exposing kids to just new programs and or revisiting ones of their favorites.
So our program is really designed to bring about therapeutic outcomes. And with that in mind, as CTRSs, we feel it's very important that we follow the TR process. And this is why we put together this presentation to really help you understand, how do you follow the TR process in a community setting, and especially with an adaptive sports camp for 1 week. The planning for this camp, it's May, and at this point, Janet is already going through and, we're starting to recruit volunteers. We're looking at who we're bringing on board to run programs. Camper applications are coming in. This is a well thought out and planned camp. And we're going to actually walk you through in the next couple of slides so that you can better understand, how do we follow the TR process? So Janet, we're going to have you start off with assessment.
Absolutely. So you heard MaryJo introduced it so nicely, that the process has started. It started even last year. It started 2 years ago when we had a typical camp in person. But I'm getting emails, I'm getting calls daily. Is there going to be camp this year? What's it going to look like? Can my child come? They've never come before. Do you accept new campers? So it starts by just those initial inquiries to myself, and we do a follow-up. Say, let me share with you the camp structure. Let me share with you what you could expect if your child were to attend. And the application itself, and in part, it is still, unfortunately, still paper, but that part of that is because of what we are bound by licensing guidelines to have available on site is paper copies. So even though we can email stuff to email the applications out to people, we still need to have it returned to us in a paper copy. The application itself is multiple pages, as you can imagine, because it does address everything from not just initial diagnoses and or secondary health related conditions. We ask questions about expectations. We ask questions about how can we best help your child to engage? What assistance do they need? How would you rate your child's level of independence? Do they need any adaptive equipment? Certainly, do they need part of the health assessment, but it's also on the application, is does your child need and require any medication? Is your child able to transfer and independently, or with how much assistance? And that's important for us to have as we move forward. Certainly, we want to understand their diagnoses, because as a CTRS, we know that diagnoses imply both certain challenges, certain abilities that we can expect, secondary, not just health conditions, but limitations, guidelines as it relates to appropriate planning. Okay, as we move forward, we're not there yet. But to best mitigate any and prevention of any potential harmful acts that could take place. So that application, that health assessment, not only the health assessment utilizes what is required by schools here in Connecticut and is good only for 3 years unless there's been a hospitalization and or medical change of status, in which case an annual update is expected. It has to be signed and completed by a physician, nurse practitioner. It's a regular working document. And then bottom of the line there, why would we have follow-up calls from our nurse? Well, one, if there's something that's a red flag either on the application, either it often might be because a child's a first-time camper, or that there's some vague statement or some red flag to us saying that we need to dig into this a little bit further. This person seems a little bit overtly anxious, or has identified many potential barriers. And we don't want to say no, that the child can't come to camp, but we want to work with those families and that child to be able to plan to best be able to meet their child's need. We want to discuss, certainly, if their child has any allergies, does the child bring EpiPens to camp, and let them know that we have backups as needed. But does the child know how to, we want to ask, does the child know how to utilize and self-administer their EpiPen, or does that need to be handled strictly by a nurse? Okay, so those are all things that go into that initial pre-camp assessment of the very first preliminary nature. And then MaryJo is going to talk to you then, okay, if we get them through the process and they get approved, then what?
And Janet, I just want to follow up with you. So when we get those applications in, I generally, like, I'm going through the application as a CTRS. Janet's going through the application as a CTRS. Like, we have many sets of eyes. Even the nurse runs through the application. You know, it's really, we want to make sure that we have the best picture of the camper, so we can make sure that we're supporting their needs. You know, another thing that comes up is toileting. You know, is this going to be something where mom and dad are going to have to come in and assist with toileting? But there's all of the various things that we need to think about. And Janet's right. So as we are moving on in assessment, throughout the day, both Janet and I are observing the various activities that are going on and our participants' responses. So, you know, Janet and I, if we had Fitbits on, you wouldn't believe the miles that we get, and our nurse too. We are walking, you know, we generally have a couple programs going on at once when you get to see what the day-to-day schedule looks like. And we are walking from one area to another area. We are observing the campers. We're observing, you know, does this child look fatigued? Does this child need more assistance? Is this wheelchair right for this individual? We are also checking in with our coaches, our volunteers, and of course the campers. We have informal conversations throughout the day. And this is oftentimes when we pick up information. You know, it's, as the volunteer coordinator, sometimes a volunteer will come up to me and say, MaryJo, so-and-so I was their volunteer for the past couple of years and they don't have a volunteer this year and they're upset. And it's because, Janet and I both felt that at this point, this camper no longer needed a volunteer, but then this information is brought to us and we may be having a discussion with that camper. Why do you think you need a volunteer? And if they can make a good argument why they need one, then we definitely get them a volunteer. Sometimes they just need a good pep talk. Like, listen, you can do this. And in fact, maybe we need to give them a little bit more leadership responsibility. So I gotta tell you, a real big part of our assessment once the camper gets through that door really is being a keen observer. We're also looking for safety, right? Any program you do, you're observing and, who's not using the curb cuts to get down the sidewalk onto the driveway, right? So all those sorts of things. The other thing that's important to mention is that the campers complete a survey on their very first day of camp. And on that survey, they identify the goals that they would like to reach by the end of camp. So it's important for us to have a good understanding of, what are those goals? Why did this camper come to camp? What is something that they would like to accomplish by the end of the week? Janet, was there anything that you wanted to add with this?
No, I think you really hit on the real key points of that assessment process is, yeah, some of it takes place prior to, but day one, boy, do we learn a lot about our campers, even those who have been coming to camp for more than 1 year. So we would be remiss if we, again, didn't bring in and refer you back. We're part of the API process. That planning is critical, and it's comprehensive program planning based on, you heard me say a little bit ago about understanding and how we plan based on what do we know about individual diagnoses, and what does that indicate in regards to the directions that need to be taken for establishing programs. So, and setting the goals. So overall, programmatically, what are the goals that we're looking at, but then also individually that we are working with our campers. You heard MaryJo say that we take a survey, we ask them, what is it you want to accomplish this week? So if we know that John Smith really wants to be able to hit the tennis ball over the net, then by gosh, I'll relay that information to the head tennis coach, the assistant tennis coach, the volunteer working directly with him to really work to say, okay, let's set up a plan. What are the steps that need to take place? We certainly are looking at providing support so these kids can just grow and utilize the skills as it relates to just social interaction. Again, you heard MaryJo cite earlier on with the literature reviews and the research that she studied. Well, we see it. These kids are coming, and many of them either have come from a kind of a social isolation situation, or they may come and they are so happy to be in a place that accepts them for who they are, that they have never had to demonstrate appropriate behaviors as it relates to social interaction. So being able to initiate, maintain conversation, not interrupt others. Again, we see that for some kids, that because they're cute, for lack of identification of any other way, but we love all our kids, but that families express to us that it's a frustration that their child is allowed to get away with things that other kids don't because they're cute and because they are the only child in their school that uses a wheelchair or has a modification for mobility challenges. So at camp, that doesn't happen. That we don't treat our kids any differently. We have expectations as it relates to engagement. We're going to work on helping the kids learn and acquire as many sport-related skills but also not just the sport related skills, but when you think of the greater picture of learning and following the rules, turn taking, again, friendship building skills. And it's all about, being kind, being a friend, being courteous to your volunteer, to your peers, being supportive and encouraging. And if you learn some sports skills along the way and you learn to hit that tennis ball over the net, you learn to shoot a basket, that's awesome. But it's almost, and I hate to say this, and MaryJo, you can tell me if I'm wrong, but I look at it that really for some of the kids who come to camp, the sports skills are secondary. It's the life skills that are really what the takeaway is. And I think that we touch on that moving forward.
Nope, you're definitely right, Janet. And I definitely want to echo that you would think, this is a sports camp, but when you look at what some of our campers' goals are for the week, it's to make friends, to be with my friends. It's sweet. It's very sad for me as well. Okay, so moving on to planning. So what are some other things that we do? Just like a typical program, we do a task analysis. I mean, coaches are notorious for knowing how to do a task analysis. Why? Because they break down sports skills. How do you hit the tennis ball? How do you make a basket? So we use task analysis. We also, as you can only imagine, are very familiar with modifications. So during the planning stage, we are thinking of modifications for our various campers. So in tennis, this may include using tennis balls of different sizes or compression. It could be lowering the net. It could be using a shorter and lighter racket. So it's just, it's important to think about what modifications does each camper need, or we try to group our campers by abilities. Oftentimes it's like, okay, what are we going to do with this group? Like, what's going to make the most sense? In planning, it's also really important that our campers have choice. You will see that throughout the day, our next slide's actually going to show you a picture of a typical day. Throughout the day, participants have what's known as camper choice. So that's built in there as well. And it's also important when we're planning what activities to offer. Are these functional activities? Will these skills transfer? So for, you think about teaching tennis, yes, right? Or teaching basketball. The wonderful thing is that a lot of these campers can then go to the hospital for special care, to the adaptive sports program. So when we're introducing track and field, this may be someone who it's the first time they're being introduced to it and they're like, oh my gosh, this is great. And then they find out like, wow, I could actually join Janet's program and I could continue doing this. So I think it's also really important that we're introducing them to activities that may be lifelong activities. It may introduce them to like a whole new world of possibility. So the Hospital for Special Care, they also sponsor the junior wheelchair basketball team. They have track and field, they have swimming. So depending on where our program is, there's been years that we have been at a facility that had a pool. And, those participants, for some of them, if it was like their first time really, being in the water and swimming, and next thing you know, we're hooking them up with the swimming program through the Hospital for Special Care. So I think that's just really important. And the last piece is, we always want to make sure that our activities are age appropriate. So, and in this planning stage, I just want to say that we are working with a lot of different coaches. We are bringing CTRSs from other hospitals. I know there's a CTRS that we bring in, and She assists with our adaptive golf. And every year she looks forward to being with us. It's another part of networking. We've had a CTRS come in and do dance and movement one year. So, you know, it's a lot of coordination, and we're always looking at, and Janet will speak about this more in a bit, but we're looking at what the evaluations say. And you're going to see that we made some changes. So what, you know, started off as a tennis camp, and you know, now we actually have time for arts and crafts as one of the options, which 10 years ago, I think if Janet or I had suggested that, we would have been met with sheer horror, right? Like, how could we do this? But we, through our evaluation, and again, it goes back to the needs of your participants. When you are trying to decide like what programs are appropriate, you know, you have to look at who are our campers. And for some of the campers that come to us, they cannot do a full 6 hours of constant going. Like they just don't have the endurance for that. So I think, you know, you'll see in the evaluation piece, the changes we made, they really go back, you know, we take that data, we go back to the planning phase and say, okay, you know, we have more campers that are talking about this. Maybe we need a more elite track for some of our campers. And it's really, I think that's part of the fun that, you know, we have this program and it's constantly evolving.
Oh, no.
It evolves every year. Janet's saying, oh no, I'm wondering if we're losing her. Okay, so Janet, so we apologize. We really tried to blow this up as much as we could, but we wanted to show you what a typical schedule of activities would look like. And Janet, if you'd like to talk about, this is from our 2018 year.
Yep. So absolutely. And again, I said, oh no, because I got that little blurb that came up and said, your internet is unstable. And I'm like, oh dear. Well, let's hope that I get to stay with you. So I want to draw your attention just to a couple of things on the schedule. And yes, MaryJo noted this is a schedule from 2018, although we change the schedule each year based on not only what we have at our disposal and availability, whether it's resources, sometimes we have equipment and or staff on loan from US Paralympics, or as I said, from the hospital, or again, it might be a Paralympic athlete who happens to be in town, and then we'll be like, really? So we try to bring them on board to certainly share their skill set. So a couple of things that, as I said, I want to draw your attention to, because the schedule is made up in a very purposeful manner. The timing of everything, including giving time, that we expect staff to arrive between 7:30 and 8 o'clock. We do a brief meeting with all of the camp staff prior to any of the volunteers checking in part to make sure that all the staff are on board. Has there been any issues that came up overnight that parents may have contacted the nurse and she needs to bring forward? We review the day, we review the weather, we review anything that may have come up. But then volunteers check in first, and then we get campers checking in. And that's done with the camp director. So myself is checking in, and the nurse are checking in the campers every day intuitively and in person. So one of the other things that I wanted to pull you aside and draw your attention to is day one, every camper as they check in gets a camp t-shirt. You saw in the picture, they were all wearing these beautiful blue tie-dye shirts. Well, that photo is done every day right after lunch. And it's purposefully done. It's done because we do get a lot of funding support from a variety of grants. You heard me mention the Reeve Foundation earlier. Well, there are others as well. And we want to be able to provide photo ops and photos to those funders to show that their dollars truly did go to people. And where better than to show you all saw the photo. I mean, that's powerful. It's a beautiful image of almost 100 people all there for the same reason. So taking a picture on day one before their shirts are all soiled from sweat and just play, it's necessary. And one of the things I want to point out is, yes, tennis happens every day. Tennis happens every morning. Tennis happens every afternoon. Not only because, yes, the camp grew out of the need for tennis, but that it still is the #1 favorite activity. Why cut it? Other activities and kind of came about over the years in recognition that we recognized over the years that, okay, tennis wasn't a skill that kids were learning. So camp was started to help kids learn tennis. Well, over time, we learned that it wasn't just tennis the kids didn't know, but the kids did not know or have any idea or exposure to. MaryJo talked about track and field for kids with physical disabilities, basketball, hand cycling, climbing. We were like, oh my gosh, all of these programs are things that don't exist. So we felt that we have the ability, so we owe it to these kids to share as much as possible. Every year it's something different, whether it's in 2018, it was sit volleyball, that was new. It was adaptive yoga, that was new. I'm trying to think, every year there is something new. You heard MaryJo mention the one year we did outdoors sled hockey on artificial ice. It was really kind of wild and crazy, but it was fun. It was awesome. So those are all necessities. And again, every day too, with the schedule, it's purposeful that the kids and families we connect with every family as they're picking up their child. Volunteers that are under age 18, we also make sure that they get signed out to a parent in order to be respectful and following the guidelines, obviously. But then afterwards, after the campers and volunteers have all left for the day, we get together as staff and we discuss the day and discuss any concerns, any celebrations. And then we bring forth and say, everybody, some folks will get homework assignments for the night. If we've decided that, it looks like we need to really come up with plan B and C, which we've already done, but tweak it a little bit because it looks like we're going to have severe thunderstorm warnings for tomorrow afternoon. So we asked, are there any staff who want to come up with some indoor games beyond what the A, B, and C plans were? And we have awesome staff. We have awesome staff. So the fact that they just go home and they'll be like, yeah, pick me. I'll do it. And awesome, wonderful. Come back tomorrow with some options. So that's the schedule. Next, we're going to talk about how do we actually make that all happen, or implementation in the API process. So what is one of the things that really sets our camp apart is, and we've touched on this, the coaches. The coaches themselves are past or current Paralympic athletes themselves. And they're not cocky athletes. They're not somebody who's there for themselves. They're there to give back. They're there to be, indeed, that positive role model, the mentor, somebody who's been where all these kids have come from. Folks who, many of them have gone on for bachelor's degrees, master's degrees, and beyond in related fields. So teachers, recreation therapists, social workers, case managers, working in and with people. So MaryJo mentioned earlier, the whole ability for our staff to have and be able to utilize, understand active listening, and have acute observation skills. So it's not just MaryJo and I running around like rabbits, but that in every given activity, any given time, the coaches themselves are like little sponges, and they're soaking it in and bring it back to us at the end of the day. They're managing their little groups or big groups, depending on the ages. They're able to indicate to, provide supports to volunteers to, again, assist in making the experience for those campers as best as possible within their group, whether it's providing the direction that, gee, I think Sally is only going to really be able to tolerate maybe 50% of the time. And if it looks at all like she's fatiguing, offer some water, some shade, and even if need be, take a little walk inside to the air conditioning. You know, that type of management of people is what the expectation is. It does take a special person. And again, we know we're very, very fortunate and blessed that we have a lot of those folks here in Connecticut or New England, so that they're able to travel to be with us for that week. And they love it. It's a privilege for them. It's a privilege for all of us. So that the staff really are able to then get individual needs of our campers met, because they live it every day.
They do. And I gotta tell you, one of the greatest, in my opinion, one of the greatest things about this camp is that our coaches have been there, and many of them actually went to camp when they were little. So it's just such a wonderful experience. And I think they're happy to give back, and they're happy to be mentors to all of these young campers.
And I think one last thing with that, and you don't need to change the slide, but it is the campers so appreciate it, because they're people that look like them, that are in chairs or use, crutches, potentially may have prosthetics, but it's people who not just walk the walk, they talk the talk, they live it. And so they're real. They're more real than MaryJo and I, because we can jump in a sports wheelchair, but we don't need to.
Right.
We do it for fun. And so I think that, and there's a difference there, but I think that when there's that inherent, just natural relationship, the kids get it and they love it.
Most definitely. I think we're going to hear some of this in our survey data. So when we're talking about implementation, some of the other things that we just wanted to make sure that you understood was, part of implementation is making sure that all the equipment is functioning properly. And this includes the sports wheelchairs that the participants use. So that means, like, in the morning when you saw how early staff get in, we have coaches there who are going around, they're checking all of the chairs, they're making sure that tires are filled correctly. We are making plans to, like, what supplies are we going to need and where are we going to need them? So we're planning that all out. We're always thinking about risk management. And one of the things, as you can imagine, with any sports, in August, in Connecticut, outside, that's going to be really hot, right? So dehydration is something that we always, we think about. The campers generally get a water bottle on the first day of camp, and they put their names on it. We try to encourage them to bring it every day, but we have these big, like, what are they, 5-gallon jugs, Janet, of water that we make sure there's water at the tennis courts. We make sure there's water in the field. We actually make sure there's water in the gym. Janet mentioned the weather, and that's something that, we are always on top of is, what is the weather going to be? Do we need to have an alternative plan? And you know how it is in August. Sometimes you get like these crazy thunderstorms. All of a sudden the skies start getting dark, and we are right there figuring out, like, okay, where are we bringing people? What are we going to be doing? In the implementation phase, I have to say that, for each of the activities, campers do get a really clear introduction as to, what the activity is, why this activity is important. Our debriefing really occurs at the end of the day. So we're not debriefing after each activity. And let me tell you why, because as soon as one activity ends, the campers are ready to go to the next activity. I mean, I can't even catch them. So, they're running off, they're running to lunch, they're running here, they're running there. At the end of the day is really a great time for all of the campers, the coaches, the volunteers. We all come together. and we talk about the day and are people meeting their goals, you know? So it's just such a great program. So part of implementation are our volunteers. Volunteers really help us contain costs while providing one-to-one support for all new campers and those under 11 years of age. Some have actually been volunteering since the camp started over 30 years ago. Up until about 2 years ago, and Janet, you can correct me if I'm wrong, volunteers went through just like volunteer services. And then the first day of camp, I would meet with them. That'd be the first time I met them. I'd meet with them that very first morning of camp, and we'd go over, you know, what their purpose was and, you know, some camp rules and things to consider. But Janet and I talked about it and we said, you know what, we want to bring the volunteers in prior to camp starting. So I believe it was for camp 2019 that year, we brought them in. We had a new coordinator of volunteer services. It was Janet and I. And we talked about, you know, what is your role? And we also talked to them about the importance of promoting independence and that our camp was not to create an environment of learned helplessness, that, you know, we were there to support our campers in reaching their goals, to support our campers to be as independent as possible. We talked to them about the importance of socialization and how they could be role models for that. You know, so we already told you, many of our campers, their goals, they want to make friends during this 1 week. They want to be with their buddies. And a lot of them need encouragement, especially for that initiation of social contact. So what's wonderful and very heartwarming to me is when Janet and I walk into the cafeteria and what we see are tables with mixed groups of campers, volunteers, some coaches, all over. So it's not like all of our volunteers are like, whoo, I get a break from this little camper for a while. It's my lunchtime. We do everything together over the course of the day. And quite honestly, I couldn't imagine how we could do camp without the volunteers. And the campers, they love their volunteers. Like, they can't wait to see them when they get there in the morning. And, you know, God forbid one of our volunteers has the day off because they had to go for a driver's license test, or they had to get a shot for college in the fall, or their physical done and they can't make it, or they leave half day. You know, you see the camper and they're like, you know, I missed my volunteer. So it's kind of cute. But they are vetted through the hospital, so, which is good. We don't have to do that part. So they have to fill out an application, that initial interview. And, you know, during that week in camp, unfortunately for some of them, I really have had to be on in the past and kind of remind them like, hey, this is why you're here. And sometimes that just means, you know what, we find a job that's a better fit for them. So maybe they have difficulty just being with a camper all day. Maybe they're better off if they're the ones that are setting up our water stations and setting up our activity areas. So it's really getting to know the volunteers, what the best fit is for them. All right, so we're going to be wrapping it up. We only have about 10 minutes and I know we still have to hit evaluation. So Janet, you're up.
All right. So again, we're hitting home to you the whole API process, and we would be remiss if we didn't talk about evaluation. But the evaluation is done. You saw me point out on the schedule. Campers, we check in with the campers. So the formative evaluation is that one-on-one checking in during the day, formally in a formal process with myself as the director and the nurse, in opening, closing, but also throughout the day. As MaryJo mentioned earlier, the volunteers are really keen, and our coaches are, to know, is anything going on? And then bringing feedback back. We do a pre and post check-in with program staff, again, to remind them anything you need to bring to the table or that bubbled up. When we talk about the summative evaluation, we are talking about the whole surveys, the camper survey before they get embedded in everything at the beginning when they get there, but there's also the survey at the end. The parents and family gets a survey, volunteers all get surveyed, the staff all get surveyed. So we're gathering data. We're like, couldn't get enough of it. To the extent that we go down with a checkoff of, checklist and a clipboard with every single camper on the last day. Did you get your survey completed? The same with the volunteers. Oh, wait, before you leave, could you drop off your survey? So yes, evaluation does take place. It's important.
It's very important. And as I spoke to earlier, and Janet will be speaking to in follow-up slides, but we use that to make changes to our program. So it's not like we get this data and we shove it in a drawer somewhere and say, whoo, do that evaluation. But we use that evaluation data to inform what we're going to be doing next year. And even to inform, what are some programs that maybe the hospital can offer throughout the year. And maybe even reaching out to certain campers who might be interested in playing junior basketball. So we definitely use that data.
So looking at, we want to just bring attention to what are some of the questions that we might ask and why? Certainly we want to know outside of camp, are the campers involved in any other sports or recreation activities? And if so, what are they? And if they're not, why not? And these are some of the reasons why they are not. That transportation is a big issue. Where would they find something? They don't, timing, that something may take place after school, but they can't get there. Or that, the school bus won't stay and there is no late bus if a child with a disability wants to stay for an activity. So these are just some of the reasons why that kids aren't participating, but and this is both in school or we ask about in their local communities. So are they doing so? But for most of our folks, the answer is no, they are not. And if they are doing anything, the activities that come to bear are wheelchair basketball and or sled hockey. And part of that we're going to talk about in a little bit. These also, we ask, and in part this purposefully is here because we did ask prior to 2018, we used to frame a question saying, does living with a disability impact your participation in school and community? Well, we would get a lot of nobody answering the question, which we're like, why is that? Well, part of it is that some of our kids we come to see don't identify themselves as having a disability. But also, so then we said, okay, let's change it up. So it's a little changing the wording to get a better answer for the question we really want. So we changed the question to say, is it difficult to participate in school or town sports or recreation? So changing it to that. And this one really important. Why does hospital special care Von Lundell Adaptive Sports Camp matter to you? And you heard MaryJo mention earlier, and I just want to reiterate it because I think it's crucial and it's critical. It's important because kids are identifying and they can do a checkoff and they can write in things. But what we see the write-ins are so many times, I get a chance to have a friend. It's the only place all year I feel that I'm supported. It's the only place where I'm allowed to be me. It's the acceptance. It's yes, you'll see some sports skills acquisition, increase in physical skills, social skills, leadership, but it's that personal connectedness of what those kids get out of the program. When we ask the question, if you're participating in sports and or recreation outside of camp, well, how many hours and where? And I don't know if it's a good thing or not, but for the kids who were participating, it was only 2 hours a week. Think of that in comparison to typical kids. Do your typical athletes do only 2 hours a week? Again, some rough data as it relates to some of the post-survey questions, feeling challenged, motivated, feeling that the kids are that the campers are achieving their goals. Would they come to camp next year? Would they recommend camp to a friend or anyone? And look at these numbers, folks, 90s. And 5-year, you heard us say earlier that we were talking about the 5-year data. And so we tracked, and these were what we're hitting for 5 years, the things that were brought to the forefront time and time again. The whole communication skills, the friendship skills, self-confidence, social skills, sports specific, physical skills, again and again and again.
So when asked what word best describes camp, this is what we received. And I am not one for reading off slides, but I gotta tell you, listen to this list. Fun, awesome, inclusive, empowering, exciting, life-changing, motivational, and authentic peer group. And this is not surprising, as the literature that we looked at earlier, Lundberg and fellow researchers applied in 2011, that they would occasionally hear from individuals participating in adaptive sports that this is the best thing I've ever done for myself, or participating in this program changed my life. So parents take a survey only at the end of the program on the last day of camp. Here are some of the quotes, and I just want to draw your attention to the bolded words. So, new friends, fits in, feels good about himself and his chair. This is awesome. Notice change after 1 week. Role models that look like him. Volunteers are also asked, we're still on the parents. Child among his peers and competing at the same level as everyone else. Camp has been a life changer. It's an authentic peer group. It's been a fun, positive experience. And this last quote really stuck with me. This is her only time she is accepted for exactly who she is. She blossoms and grows so much. So now we're on the volunteer survey. My apologies. So volunteers, these are a sample of the questions that we ask our volunteers. And again, they are only asked questions on the last day of camp. And again, these are just some sample questions in case you yourself would like to use some of these in your own questionnaires. But if you draw your attention to the bolded words, what did the volunteers get out of this? It taught me something about perspective and kindness, a chance to use my athletic passions to help others directly. This camp was an eye-opener. It was a humbling experience. My outlook on individuals with disabilities has completely changed. Friendships, favorite week of the year. I've learned patience. It helps me be a better coach. And again, this last quote, I'm just gonna speak on the bolded part. There is such a positive attitude with every camper and so much patience and excitement with everyone here that you wouldn't be able to find at any other camp.
Okay,
so I think we have like a minute or two to talk about how we have used this data to drive.
Yeah, we use the data to really bring about change in every aspect of camp, whether it's staffing and what our needs are. You heard me say earlier that we utilize certified nursing assistants. That was because we realized after a few years that, whoa, we had volunteers taking campers to the bathroom because the volunteers wanted to support their camper in their growth of life skills. Well, we said, yeah, no, that should be employees, trained people to assist folks in the bathroom, even though as a volunteer, that's really sweet of you to offer to help support your camper. So making structural changes to the organizational structure, bringing on new people. It's making changes as it relates to the ratios. Changing in 2019, we added a sport intensive week because we did have kids who, as far as programmatically, the structure, So it was because we had kids who were able to, and we're asking for a higher quality of sport delivery. We change up the opportunities as it relates to program delivery. We change up the opportunities, and you can probably scroll to the next slide, MaryJo. We change up how we went about doing donor recognition that we used to years ago. For many, many years, there was a big barbecue the last day of camp for everyone. Well, can you imagine hundreds and hundreds of people milling about? It was a little overwhelming for everyone. And we want camp to focus on the campers. So we made changes. Donors are now certainly invited, welcome to come to camp, but they get a private tour led by our foundation staff. We tried to change camper recognition 1 year we gave out a photo memory book. And we said, well, with today's technology, nobody wants a photo book. So we changed it up and we gave them a funky certificate that had multiple pictures and groupings of friends and brought into place, again, a whole different feel. But did we learn our lesson that campers spoke loudly that they wanted their camper photo books back because that was something personal to them, and that, yeah, they may have a cell phone or they may not, but that they like showing off their camper photo book. So we have not gotten rid of it. All right. Let's see.
So we briefly, I wanted to just say that COVID has really impacted camp for summer 2020 and also for 2021. We're still not sure what's going to be happening. But we wanted to thank all of you for listening to our presentation today. We really hope that you have a better understanding of how the API process, how it applies to an adaptive sports camp, and maybe how you can design your own camp. Adaptive sports camps truly have such a positive impact on our participants. The strongest evidence for this is that our participants, our volunteers, and our staff keep coming back year after year. Janet?
Thank you, everybody. It's been a pleasure to be with you all. And really, reach out to MaryJo or I at any time. We would love to continue the conversation. This is a program that is near and dear to our hearts. We're passionate about it, and welcome y'all. If you're interested, let us know, and we'll invite you to come down and take a walkthrough with us and see it in action.
We probably will put you to work, just saying. All right, everyone, have a great day. Enjoy the rest of the conference.
I had the